Pat, are you there? Can you hear me? Ah, you're there. How are you? Can you hear me?
I've unmuted. Yeah. How are you?
How are you? I
Good. It's finally good to see you.
my gosh, thank you so much. Thank you.
Oh yeah,
Um,
this is a treat. It's a
it, it
treat.
is it is a pleasure to be connected from such a long distance and to be able to talk to you today and that you can share with all of us your knowledge.
Yeah,
And
there's no distance anymore, though, is there? With all the social distancing, we're all getting closer.
we are, and today we're gonna listen and we're gonna be good listeners because we want to know you as an artist, and we would love to see. We're already looking at your office. Is that your studio actually where you
Yes,
illustrate?
yes. I we live in a loft. We're looking out of my back window. I can see the Statue of Liberty.
Really?
Yeah. And we're right across the river from where the Trade Towers used to be. And so
Oh my
this is
gosh!
it's a rather large loft, and my husband works on the other side, and I work on this side.
Wow, wow! So you have an amazing view, and
Yeah, we do. We have a really good view. So I'm really thankful for that. Yeah. But it's not quite the same as the view down in Rio and in Bahia where I've been. Wouldn't mind seeing that view either. How are you guys doing down there?
So,
How's
so,
it?
let me tell you, we are in Brazil, but we're closer to Sao Paulo. I'm a little
Mm-hmm.
bit farther from Rio. I'm about 2 hours from Rio, but it's always beautiful to be there. And yeah, it's beautiful tropical place, and Sao
Mm-hmm.
Paulo is very nice. And we are like any other publisher,
Mm-hmm.
reinventing our business
Yes,
and trying to
yes.
coexist.
It's necessary. But fortunately, we can do that, right? Because publishing can operate like this. I watched your program with Vanessa and then with Harold, and it's true. It's like you can work. We're used to working on our own, so this hasn't been a big change at all, except for the
No, no,
obvious.
it hasn't for us, right?
Yeah.
For a lot of, it depends on your sector of your area.
Yeah.
Things maybe have shifted definitely to a degree, but in terms of working, we from the editorial business, if you're an artist or an author, yes, you're working on your cave 24 hours. But of
Yeah.
course, if you're a publisher, you may have a place, or you may
Hmm.
work from home as well. Depends on how you set your structure. And right now we're seeing that every agent
Hmm.
from every editor or art director are working from home. And
Yes.
who knows what is gonna be after all this finish? Who knows if the trends are gonna follow, right? That path.
It has to change. It must change. I mean, look what we found out, that you can't do this. This is what it took for me to be dragged online, okay? Because I've been teaching classes online, and
Yeah,
I never would have gotten to that if I hadn't been forced to, you know?
you know,
So,
you just said something so true. You said the magic word.
forced?
Necessity creates to us
Yes.
humans to invent things.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
are so used to create habits. Oh, we don't need this. We don't have
Yes.
to do this, right? And when
Yeah.
necessity knocks at your door, and you say, "Whoops, I need to, sustain my family,"
Yeah.
and what I'm gonna do? Well, I'm gonna be as savvy as possible in technology, which I'm learning because I am not.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. The thing that tickled me was all through it, my students would say things like, Pat, look at the little button down at the bottom. They were constantly teaching me how to do this, which was fine. But there were some real advantages to working like this that I would not have ever thought about. I
Definitely.
mean, it was wild. The end of the semester in my class, because I teach at Pratt and at Parsons, and at the end of the semester, I invite a publisher to come take a look at what the students have done all semester long.
Nice.
And that normally I'm begging them, come to Brooklyn, and I give them brownies, and I get them a ride, or they come because they're always hoping to find new talent. But I usually have to, do a little coercing.
Yes.
And this time, everybody's at home. And I sent out this huge email just asking it, will anybody please come to this last class and just take a look at what the students have done? All these people responded. And so these kids are showing their work to like all the top editors and art directors and agents. And it was phenomenal.
So,
It was phenomenal.
magic in your room, because suddenly that's what we're also getting to know, right? That you can work on your PJs, or you can, you can wear makeup if that makes you feel good. If that's the person that, everybody has its own, ideas and beliefs. And, I don't put makeup, but I do. You try to be nice today for you.
Got up, put on some lipstick. Yeah.
I throw just a little bit of gloss,
Uh-huh.
But the reality is, as a teacher, and we know this, right? Teachers are probably the last people to put some makeup and some, mascara, because, that is not the priority. The priority
Yes.
is to really embrace the moment of inspiring the students to learn, right? And to acquire all this knowledge. And we want to hear from you about this. So I know you're a teacher, you're a phenomenal artist, illustrator. Yes, you are. And when did you started to actually have the feeling that you could become a mentor and you could share? Because I guess you have to have some confidence also to say, okay, I think I can, share the knowledge and I can be a mentor. How does that happen? How did you did the jump, and how can you manage both responsibilities?
Yvette, you're very kind, because it really wasn't confidence. It was just like, nobody told me I couldn't. I have a tendency to like tell people, oh, you should do this, you should do that. And so when I didn't know I wanted to do children's books. I knew I liked to draw. And when I was at Pratt, I was going to school as a student there, and I talked to my teachers. 100% of them said, you can't get into that business. It's too hard. 100%.
Wow.
And thankfully, because I was in my 20s, you don't hear that stuff. You don't hear I can't do something. And so I was like, what do they know? And I decided I just wanted to go ahead and do it. But when I got my first book, I had no idea what I was doing. None. And I called somebody. I knew somebody who knew somebody who knew somebody who used to date Tom Feelings. And I called him up and I said, you don't know me, but I don't know what I'm doing and I need some help with this book. And he said, come on over. And he was working on this book that he'd been working on for years. And it was The Middle Passage. Phenomenal book. And he walked me through every step of how to put together a book. And I was so appreciative and so thankful, because I had no clue what I was doing. And I didn't want to admit it to the client, because the publisher, I didn't want her to know that. I thought they'd take the book away if they knew that I, didn't know. And he walked me through everything. And at the end of it, when I was like, how can I thank you? He wouldn't let me pay him. I mean, I said, what can I do? He said, help other people,
Oh,
And that's something I found out about this business. It is extremely helpful. Everybody helps each other. There's only about, and I say this to my students, there's only 4 people in this business that I've met who wouldn't be helpful, and I never name them,
really?
but
Yeah, that's one of the things that I was curious, because, every country has a different culture, a different ideology and behavior. And I have a hard time really believing that in Brazil we are homogeneous. And for more crazy that may sound to you, I don't see that community that really exists. I think that is very competitive. I think that they don't want to share with you as a publisher or as an agent to agent, and not even author to author. It's a tough road.
Right.
And I have been lucky enough to know how the American publishing business works. And I know ACBWY. And I can tell in first person that it's a community, and it does, I mean, you see this amount of talented people willing to help you as long as you're honest because honest is the key to the game. You know, you cannot just go there to fish and to see, oh, you know, I'm going to try to get something, because it's not going to work in any place. It won't work that formula. You really have to be honest. But I do feel Highlights Foundation, my gosh, the work that they put together. And, you know, you can approach people like you, Pat, and, you know, you're willing to share, you're willing to be here. People may not know this, but this is the first time that we are talking and we are interacting.
At last.
And you were so kind to accept this invitation, honestly.
This is one thing I found out about this business is everybody, like I said, most people are really open. And when I came out of school, I was doing advertising work and editorial work for magazines and newspapers and theater work. And that's a different planet. That's very competitive. You know, it was extremely competitive, sometimes cutthroat competitive. Because if you're going to do a magazine cover, only one person's getting on that cover.
That's
you know?
the news, right? That's news. That's about selling the news, right? Yeah. But
with children's books,
it's so different because we work for the children. We are here for the children. And I think that that makes you, you know, united as one community. It should be like that, right? And try to make the best work that we can for them.
But so, even practically speaking, you don't have to be competitive. In my classes, I'll tell students, if you have 10 students with dog stories, they're all different. The illustrations are all different.
That's true.
And if the publisher likes 10 of them, he's going to publish 10 of them. You know what I mean? It's not going to be, you're not knocking anybody out of the water by helping. And what I have found is when you help others, it comes back to you. It really does. And this business is so open. The very first SCBWI meeting that I went to, the big one, the big conference, that was what I was trying to talk to people about. It's like, you got to share. You don't just come to these conferences and try and take stuff away. Do you know what I mean? You come and you share the information that you have. So it came kind of natural to me because when I found this world of children's books and SCBWI and highlights, everybody's open-handed because they all realize everybody's on this journey. But I know what you mean about culturally speaking. I have friends in other countries and they'll say, you know, there's a very small community in my country and they don't understand that we can all share information. It only makes you better.
That's true. It makes you much richer because then you have different perspectives from around the world. Forget about your own little community, right? If you open the window, then you have the whole view to your feet, to say it like that way. And let me ask you something. Saying that, have you ever worked with a critique group? Do you have a good critique group?
Yes.
Yes, you're lucky to have one.
It is luck. It is luck. I was anti-critique groups forever. Because I'd never been to one. I'd never gone to one. And so I was like, who needs it? You know, who needs somebody else telling you what they think of your work? I always thought you got your editor, your art director talking to you, and everybody else is like, you know. And then I went to a critique group. Marion Dane Bauer was having one. I went to the University of Vermont. They have a graduate children's book program that's exquisite.
Wow.
And I sat in on one of the critique groups. It was sensational. It was so helpful, you know. And the thing, Yvette, I have to keep on reminding myself, this is a communications business that we're in. And it's not enough to put your stuff out there. This isn't fine arts. You can't just put your stuff out there. It has to be received. And in children's books, it's being received by a 5, 6, 7-year-old. You know, you have to think about who your audience is and if they're going to get what it is that you're putting out. So having other ears listening to it and other eyes on your work makes all the difference. But I didn't have a group until I decided I wanted to write middle grade.
Oh, wow.
I knew that I didn't know.
Yeah.
You know, I knew that I had no clue what I was doing.
Yeah.
And so I got a group going. But basically, we're not a group of like people who does middle grade. It's a group of friends whose opinions I trust and whose work I admire. And so they do a little bit of everything. Picture books. There's one woman working on a screenplay. One's working on a biography. One who did picture books. You know, so it's a little bit of everything. And then we have one person who's just like insane, you know, and she's kind of like, she's in there. She'll hear me. And she's touched. And so it's always good to have her in there because she's been writing a mystery ever since I've known her.
Wow.
She's been writing a murder mystery
Oh,
in
wow.
which everybody who she works with gets killed off.
Oh my gosh.
So we're all happy that she's writing it instead of actually doing it. You know?
No, of course. Of
Yeah, yeah.
course.
So
No,
I'm just saying it's a mixed group.
yeah, I think that, for example, that's important for whoever is listening now and will actually watch the replay. And we have some viewers to it today with us. So welcome, Connie and Mary Lou. We're so happy that you guys are here with us. And you know, I think that the most important thing about the critique group is, first of all, for those that doesn't know, what is a critique group, because we're talking about different cultures again and different way of doing things, is a wonderful group of people that you first of all, you have to trust that group, and you have to trust your work, because your work and your words are just ideas. An idea cannot be copyrighted. Only the work that is finished can be copyrighted. And when you have a work and you're sharing it with a group, that is called a critique group, and you get a lot of sharing ideas, suggestions, views from different perspectives. And you know, that is something that maybe doesn't happen in every single country as common as probably in the United States. I don't know, but that would be something interesting to know, because again, it's a cultural thing. And sharing your work and accepting critique, and this is positive critique, is difficult, because you know, we think like, oh, we know everything, and what you didn't like this phrase, what do you mean? You know, and these are very positive thoughts, and that makes your graphic novel, your picture book, your chapter book, you know, much more with a richer foundation. It's almost like going to school, but you have this group that is very kind and is willing to hear, read, and give you opinions. And it's mutual, right? You guys are mutual.
Yeah, it's mutual. But you also have to, sometimes it helps you solidify where you stand on something, you know, crystallize where you stand. Because just because somebody doesn't agree with what you've done or has a different way that you could approach it, doesn't mean that that's the way to go. It might not be right for you. So you do have to kind of, it helps you strengthen your core belief about what you're working on, and whether or not, your character would or would not do that. You know, so nobody's closer to it than you are, but you do have to listen, I think. You know, and I've always felt that way, even with bad reviews back in the day. You know, you would take them and you think, what part of this can I use to make the work stronger?
Exactly.
And what part of this can I just reject because it's like, it's an opinion that doesn't, you know, resonate.
That is so true what you're saying, Pat, because even your agent or your editor, sometimes they might tell you something and not necessarily might be in your own same sequence of thoughts. And you might take what it is a good observation, and you might say, you know, I really want to stay like this with this part because of this and this, right? So it's a communication, like you just said it in the beginning, right? It's an open communication. So tell me something that I'm very curious to know. Saying that there is, yes, a beautiful community of authors and illustrators between you all. Are there cliques? Is the word clique exist, or is just a myth?
No, no. I don't think of it that way. Do you know what I mean? I don't think of that because it's just so mobile. It just changes so much. It's just, to tell you the truth, having joined SCBWI years ago, that's as much of a clique as, and it's not even a clique. It's a group of people. When you find the people who like what you like and want to do what you want to do, it's not, it doesn't feel clique-like. It's not like, you know, there's the cool kids over here that you can't talk to, and then there's the folks that are ignoring. It doesn't even really, it doesn't exist like that from what I can see, because the people that I talk to is like, I talk to picture book people and middle grade people and YA people. And I talk to people who aren't published and people who have published 50,000 books. I'm doing a program on Friday about Tommy DePaolo, and Tommy was a rock god. You know, I mean, he did hundreds of books. I once did a school visit in Portland, Oregon. And when I'd been talking to this woman on the plane all the way there. And when I got off the plane, there were these guys in white tuxedos with red roses to greet me. And the woman turned to me and she said, "Who the hell are you?" And I was like, "I'm just here to do children's books talk, right?" And the woman who organized it said, "You're lucky. All you got was the tuxedos. When Tommy DePaolo came to town, we put him in the back of a car, of a convertible, sitting up on the seat, and we rode him down the middle of town, and he had a parade."
Wow.
And I said, but that's the kind of reception that Tommy got, right? And he's huge. You know, he recently passed away, but Tommy was huge. He
Yeah.
will talk to anybody about anything. You know what I'm saying? He would sit down and have a conversation with somebody who had never published a thing but wanted to, and try to be helpful.
I'm very
And
kind. I heard. I
that's the
didn't
kind of
meet
business it
him,
is.
but I heard that he was extremely kind. He's definitely very well missed because he's a
Extremely.
legacy, and he really shared a lot in his books, and we have a whole
Yes.
second encyclopedia. You
Mhm.
can refer books from him and learn from him, and really, it's a big loss. And let me ask you something. What brought you to become an illustrator? Because we would like to hear from you that part of your story. Did you
It's a
ever wanted
sordid.
to be? You ever wanted to be an illustrator?
It's a sordid tale that I use to tell to children,
Tell
because it's sort
me.
of a cautionary tale, you know. But I was 5 years old. My father was in the military, and we moved all the time. And at 5 years old, he moved us all to Kaiserslautern, Germany.
Oh
And
wow!
so, yes, so when you're in the military, you move all the time. And we didn't know anybody. And my older sister, Linda, said, "Here's what we're going to do. We'll get all of our toys, we'll put them on the grass, we'll play all day. All the kids in the neighborhood will come, and we'll meet everybody." And we put everything out on the grass. And then she left me. She said, "I have to go in the house for a minute." And she left me. And I sat out there by myself with these toys, and a yellow school bus came along with older girls on the bus. And the door opened when it stopped at the corner, and I ran across the grass and jumped on the bus. And we took off, and we went to a ballet school. So I watched these ballerinas all afternoon, and then we come back. I get back home. My mother's furious because I just disappeared. But I started drawing these ballerinas. I couldn't get that out of my head. So I'm drawing these ballerinas, and I go to kindergarten, and I found out my mother had not told me about glitter. And when I found the glitter and
Ah,
the orange glue, I was making ballerinas and selling them. And
wow!
I would come home with money in my pocket.
Selling
And
them. Look at you.
I was getting paid with M&Ms and Twinkies and all kinds of candy. And my
Wow.
mother's like, "What are you doing in kindergarten?" Right? Because I was making money. But I thought, I love this. And all through school, I kept having teachers who would let you do drawing as part of your assignment,
Mhm.
and also moving from school to school, because I didn't go to the same school twice till I got till 11th grade. And every time I would go to a new school, I could join the art club. And when you join the art club, you get to meet the new kid. You know, you get to meet people who like what you like. So art was an entree, and it just never occurred to me that I could do, something else. I just thought, oh, you can
Wow,
do this.
what a great story. That's
It
a
was
beautiful story.
I was lucky because I ran into teachers who were artists and things like that, and so it seemed natural. I've got so many students who have to kind of fight to be an artist. Their parents are afraid they'll starve or something, and so it's an uphill battle, particularly today, because in New York, I don't know what it's like where you are, but in New York, like a studio apartment can be like $4,000 a month. So these kids have to think about, can I actually make a living?
Exactly, exactly. I think this is a global question.
Hmm.
Am I gonna let my child be an artist? It doesn't matter in which area. A ballerina, a person that is gonna work in a galleria. Is
Right.
he gonna make money? Working in a galleria, being the curator of the arts. If he's gonna be an artist or even an actor, right? It's still questions like a myth because in one hand you see a lot of people making a lot of money, but it's not easy because we know that. And not talking about the publishing business, not every author is gonna have bestseller. So, and it takes a lot of years to develop your profession and to become, recognized for your work as well. So you have to
True.
earn it. And I think that these are questions, for parents that they always want to know, is my child going to be able to pay the bills at the end of the day? It's like
You know,
librarian. like
But
writing, you know.
that might not be the only question to ask. Do you know what I mean? Because if you ask the question, is my child going to be happy
Oh,
doing what they
that's more
love
important.
doing?
Definitely, that's more important.
It's in there. It's in there because even now, I mean, working as an illustrator, working as a writer, I know so many writers and illustrators who are like, they struggle. They work to pay their bills, you know what I mean? But then I also know some who have a book that goes out, boom, and they hit it and they make millions. It can go either way, but it doesn't change the fact that they love what they're doing every day. And when you see so many people who are not happy with their work, my niece was reminding me that like after 9/11, so many people changed their jobs. They got out of finance, or they got out of whatever it was that was making them a whole lot of money, and
Yes,
decided to go teach a softball team or something that they loved.
that's
Because you realize your time on the planet, you want to spend it doing something you're in love with.
and that is
And
going to
the money's
happen
important, but
probably, if we guess, because it's just guesses that we can do right now. I believe that that may happen again with this pandemic. A lot of people have a lot of time to think now at home,
yes,
and they're considering and reconsidering, are they happy doing what they are doing,
yeah,
and they might discover just that they are very good baking cookies, and they might want to spend their next years baking and making a business out of it. I mean, things happen too accidentally, right? You got
yes,
the glare and you suddenly saw that, oh my gosh, she's connected so well with the ballerina, the
yeah,
tutu, and you just, had an experience that you could see yourself doing that forever.
yes,
So I think that we're going to see a lot of shifts, also careers, and
yeah,
I'm sure there's going to be more and more new authors coming in because there's always a space for that,
yeah.
for imagination. And we just wish that everybody's okay. So that's the most important thing. And,
Hmm.
happiness is definitely number one. So tell me, what is the media that you like to use right now? Because over the years, you probably had experienced all kinds of media. What is what you're doing right now?
Well, it's true. I've experimented with different things. Excuse me. Right now, I I had people come to my class. I had different illustrators come to the class, and Mike Curato came, and Mike was
Oh,
showing the class how he had done the drawings and then scanned them in and colored everything digitally. And I thought, I can do that, And I thought, well, I'm going to go and do that. Yvette, it's never as easy as when like I remember Diane Dillon, Leo and Diane Dillon's work. Their work is phenomenal. And she was telling me one time about this technique that was really easy. And all you had to do was take this brown ink and do this drawing and cover it with pastel and do this. And I was like, I'm going to do that. And
mm.
so I came home and I did that and everything. But I didn't use the brown ink that she used. I used some that was not water repellent. And when I put the watercolor on it, everything just ran all over the place. It was just a big blurry mess. Which is another reason why I'm saying there's no competition, is because you can't copy somebody really, right? But Mike had come to class and he had shown how he worked between traditional media and then putting it into the computer. And that's what I've started doing. And it wasn't even like I tried it with one piece and I liked the effect. It was just a one-off piece I was doing for a book on Beatrix Potter, and I really liked it. But then I was doing a book and it was taking me ever to finish. And the editor said to me, if this was done digitally, you could have a little bit more time. The deadline would be a little extended. And I was like, ooh, it's going to be digital. And so I thought, okay, I can work digitally. And that's how I found out. And another time, like when you're just kind of forced into something or pressure makes you change, I took all the artwork, I took it to school. I had some of my students scan it for me, but I scanned it really huge just to be on the safe side. And when I brought it back into the computer and it was scanned really huge, all I could see in my paint was cat hair because my cat had been walking around my paints. And I was like, oh no. And I spent like weeks and weeks and weeks cleaning up the cat hair out of the pictures before I realized the human eye couldn't see it. I couldn't see it at 100%. But when you blow it up, 600%, you can see all these little microfibers and stuff. And so I spent all this time on it. It's a total learning curve, and I haven't mastered it at all, but I love it. I love being like the piece I just did last week. I love being able to paint. put it into the computer, and then tweak it and do things.
Amazing, because we I think that the secret is that we have to recognize that there's room to learn, and we always can learn something, right? And this Procreate is very new. A lot of young artists are phenomenal doing work, and like, for example, some of them you cannot even tell if it has been done by hand or
Yes.
by computer, because they are so good with the skills, and this incentivizes us, that we are not, I'm not in my 20s, I wish I was in my 20s, to follow that trend and say, oh, Procreate, which is a great tool, but I'm learning too. And I think that where we come from is we come from the old school of having our hands all messy and loving it, right? And experience with chalk and different medium of ink, and every medium brings something also different. And that's where you can do one book of one theme, and it can be completely a different book with another media.
True.
And the same theme, right? And that's where we see this all the time. So let me ask you something else in terms of your voice. Because again, here in Brazil, we would like to hear from you. How did you realize that you are an author as well? Because you are an illustrator, but you write books. You have your own books. So how did you did that leap, and how did that happen?
Well, you realize pretty early on that you can't wait for somebody to write the story that you want to draw the pictures for.
I saw that in your biography. That's your words.
It's just, sooner or later,
when am I going to get that?
Yes, because that's how publishing works. They'll get a manuscript and they'll call you. And also, growing up, there were a lot of funny things that happened in the family, and so I found that I wanted to tell stories about my brother. They were very easy to tell. He's an easy target. And so I started telling stories about him, but I didn't feel like a writer. I just knew that I was writing the stories that I wanted to illustrate. And then one day I remember getting a phone call to do a job, and they wanted me to write this story. And I was like, okay, but I don't have time to illustrate it, because I had been doing writing and illustrating for like textbooks and, other side jobs.
Yeah.
And they said, you don't have to illustrate it. We just want you to write it. And I was like, just write it? And they like, yes. And so I hung up the phone. And now, Yvette, I live in New York.
Yeah.
My mother lives in Virginia. And I called my mother in Virginia, and I'm whispering, even though the client was like in Chicago, I'm whispering, they just want me to write. Like, they don't know that I'm not a writer. And I felt like I was getting away with something, but I loved it. I loved the writing, and I found like it's a muscle to me. It's like a muscle. And the more you do it, I think the more comfortable you get with it and the more flexible you feel, and so it doesn't seem quite as scary. It's only scary when you're sitting down in front of this white page of paper and you realize, I don't know anything, I don't know how to start. But it's still fun. It's exciting. So that kind of grew.
That is fantastic. That is a very interesting story that you just told us, how it happened. That is great. Because
but you write, don't you? I saw that you write. Don't you write?
Yeah, I do write also. And I was just going to tell you, it was an interesting story because, again, it was accidentally, right? It was like something that you didn't know it was within you. And they offer you this, and then, whoa, you discover that, well, I can do this, I can put it together, right? And one thing that you said, it's true, is like the first book that you write, you think, how can I start? This is a question of, I think everybody, have that question in the beginning. So let me ask another question. As an illustrator, are you a picky illustrator now, and you get to choose what you want to illustrate and from whom and what topic? Or you are like, yeah, just give me the job and I'll do it?
No, I don't feel picky. I mean, like, of course you can turn down anything that you don't want to do.
Or you don't believe,
mostly I just do my own stories.
Or you may not believe in it, right? You may not believe.
Right. I mean, if I didn't, no, I wouldn't do it. I have turned down things that I just didn't feel were me, you know. But for the most part, I'm doing the books that I want to do, that I'm writing myself. The stuff that I'm doing that comes to me from the publishers tends to be like, it'll be a contribution to a collection. You know, maybe they'll get like 10 illustrators illustrate a book about whatever, that kind of stuff. And so usually it's always attractive. Like I did one for Sesame Street. They did a Sesame Street one that was big fun, you know. So those kind of things. Or the book I just did one for was Nikki Grimes, you know, or I'll do a book jacket, something like that. Those are usually fun. Um, your own stories, though, that's what I really want to get to. And
Yeah.
so that's what I try to focus on, is like developing my own stories.
Yeah, I think that when you start writing your own stories, you discover a different world, right? You become from illustrating others the stories, and then you realize that you have a whole set of storytelling in your wardrobes,
Mhm.
and you can choose what outfit to wear. And today I'm going to talk about flowers and how to keep the gardening and inspiring about gardening, which is one of the topics I think we're going to see, because a lot of houses are doing a lot of gardening these days.
Right.
And tomorrow maybe you have a wardrobe about something else. And
It's true. When somebody else does it, though, you don't know where you're going to be going, and that can be exciting.
yeah,
Somebody will, they'll send you a manuscript about something you never would have thought about doing. So it's interesting.
and in your case, for example, you did said earlier that you have picture books, but also you started writing also for older kids, correct? So
Hmm.
that was not testing other market, because wow, writing for teenagers is another world.
Well, this is what I did was middle grade. I haven't done teenage. I did one teen book, but it was with Walter Dean Myers.
Yeah.
Um, he was coordinating a series of books for teenagers, and it was under one of those assumed names where they put somebody's name on the cover and a whole bunch of different writers write it. And so but this was how I learned, because under Walter's guidance, it was like taking a crash course in how to write a novel, because
Yeah,
he just gave you every step of the way. And I really felt like, okay, I could do this if I was like, a Dotson could do this, you know what I mean? A cat could write, because he was just so clear on how to set it up.
that's great.
So that was a really crash course in writing for older kids. But the thing is, with middle grade, you have to take out stuff like, you can't use bad language, you can't have bad habits. So you have to be mindful of the age group.
Yeah, and it gives you room to grow as a person, because some of the authors are very lucky to flip and flap from children's books to adult books. Even jumping to an adult book and reading a
Sure.
novel, a biography, it's another world. And yes, you have
Yeah.
the foundation, but it's nothing like writing a picture book versus or a poem. There's a lot of books here in Brazil. One of the things that I see the most is adults writing poem books. You know,
Yeah.
poems books doesn't has nothing to do with the world of picture book or chapter books, and it's completely different genre.
But if
So
you write. Do you know what I mean? It's like, I've got friends who write, they'll write books and they'll do plays. Like, I've got a friend, Connie, who's watching, she's a playwright, but
yeah,
she can write. If you can write, you can write. So she can write novels. You can be pretty flexible. It's just a question of sitting down and packaging it. Do you know what I mean? Like, I've got a friend now who's like a big time author, who got in touch because she wants to write now a really young series, because she's got a granddaughter and she's thinking, I'm gonna put this together for little bitty kids. And
mhm.
so you have to channel a different voice. That's all.
That's great. That's great. So right now, what is your passion? Right now, your passion is still with children's books, or you are getting to enjoy the middle grade.
It
Um,
depends on the day. I
Day
have,
yeah, and the
you know,
weather and the weather.
yes, the day, the weather, the mood. But no, I'm working on another middle grade book, because the one that I did, I've signed up another one with one of the characters from the first book. And so that's what I'm working on. But I've got a couple of picture books that I'm trying to develop on the side, that I've
Yeah,
been toying with for like years. And what I love is, you can just keep pushing these things along, you have to be careful, because I did one I had an idea for, and I showed it to an editor, and she was like, let's do it. And I was like, there's nothing there yet. It's just an idea. And she was like, let's do this. And I thought, oh my goodness. And that had to come together really quickly and oddly, because that one thing I learned was, you wait till you actually have the thing developed, before you show it to somebody, because that one kind of took me by surprise. And I was like,
Oh, well, but just imagine, just the idea spark the want of having that whole project be conceptualized, and actually, it's an idea that went up, it got approved, and you never know, right? And of course, you trust your editor with the idea as well, and
oh
not,
yes,
not
oh
every
yes,
idea you're gonna shoot out aloud, of course.
no, no,
This,
no, no, no.
the time and the person and everything. Something has to
Yeah,
be in balance
yeah.
with the harmony and the cosmos for it to be perfect. So let
Yeah,
me,
but I'm just saying it can take you by surprise,
yeah,
because
it
I
can be a
sometimes
surprise. Yeah, you have to be ready. You have to be ready.
you don't want, yes, you have to be prepared. You have to
Yeah.
not go out there half baked,
That's true. That's true. So I want to use this opportunity. We have less than 6 minutes, and this is your time. I want to really have everyone seen some of your books. Are you kind enough to? Do you have some to share with us and sing some of your cover
Sure.
books? Yeah.
Well, the one that I was talking about, the one that took me by surprise, I will tell you a little story,
Yeah.
okay? Because here's how it started. This is what happened. This
Yeah.
is why it happened so suddenly. This little girl came to visit, okay? So she was 5 years old, 4 years old. Her name's Eva, and she came to visit from England, my friend's granddaughter. And when she was getting ready to leave, her father was concerned that they would go to the airport and possibly get separated. So he gave her his phone number, and he said, put my phone number in your shoe, so that if we get separated, you can call a policeman or an adult and they'll find me, right? And she said, I don't need your phone number, Dad. She had this. Right? She had this picture of her parents. And I was like, that's hilarious. And so I put that picture on, I did a drawing and I put the picture in it, because I thought, from her point of view, her parents are missing. It's not her. They've gone missing, right? And so I would do a story about a little girl who's looking for her mother because her mother went missing. And I showed it to the editor, and the editor's like, let's do it. And I was like, there's no story yet. So that happened very suddenly, and had to come together very quickly. And that's the one that I found out, if I worked on it digitally, I would have more time.
Okay.
So I did that one. And the one that I'm working on is a sequel to Trace. This is the middle grade novel. I didn't do the cover. I really liked the cover.
Yeah. Wow.
It's
Wow.
about a 13-year-old boy in Brooklyn, and there were a couple of true incidents that happened. There was a car crash years ago where a guy drove his car into a river, and he couldn't get out because it was a newish car and the electrical system shut down. Windows wouldn't go down, door wouldn't open. He couldn't get out, and water's filling the car, and he was going to drown. And at the very last minute, hands came through the window and pulled him out. And I went on YouTube and I watched the rescue, and I could see the guys in the raft and the very, very top of the car, and I see this guy pop up and they pull him into the raft. Well, when they got back to the shore and they towed the car out of the water, the windows were still rolled up.
Oh my God. I got
Oh
chills.
my God.
I got chills.
Yes, yes. That's exactly it. And that story just stayed with me forever. And well, not forever, like that happened in 2012, I think. And so then I was reading about the draft riots in New York in 1863. And Yvette, for some reason, in my head, these stories started to work towards each other. And I decided to do a story that would tie them together, you know? So that's how the story started. And now I'm working on this second one, and I have no idea.
Well,
Sometimes I think you know where you're going, huh?
it's challenging, right? It's challenging.
It is.
How you say in English, a sequence of this. Is that what it is? It's a
Well, it's not really a sequel. This is it's a separate story,
okay.
but it's still you have no idea where it's going.
Yeah.
A friend of mine is a friend of Neil Gaiman's, and he said Neil called him one time and said, "My character just stabbed somebody. What do I do?" You know,
Yeah.
because
the
You
TV
don't necessarily
shows.
know.
That sounds like a TV show. Don't let this person die, because then how are we going to jump to the
I
next?
need them. I need this character. You
That's
know.
funny. That's funny. So let me ask you one more question. Right now, there's a controversy, and I'm not sure really if it's a controversy or not, about African Americans. They want to illustrate uh, diversity, and they want to illustrate for children that can see themselves in the books, that they can, be familiar and saying, I'm like that little girl, or I'm
Mhm.
that little boy. And there is a controversy about um, publishers. Should we, hire the African American to draw that specifically picture book, or should we hire an Indian from India and draw a story from, maybe a
Mhm.
folk culture from India? Or should we hire not necessarily that background of a person, and hire anybody? Because there's research, and through research you can, look in Google, and you can create all these sketches and composition. You may not belong from that country or that culture.
Right.
You can still, as an artist, you could still draw. What is your thought on that? How would you take that? uh, that what is happening in the air, and is there a division going on, or is there
Well,
an opportunity going on?
oh, there's always opportunity, but this has been going on in the States anyway since I'd say the 70s, the 80s. You know, about cultural, being coming from the culture. Um, my feeling is this: is that truthfully, if you're within the culture, you're going to know things that somebody else might not. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're the best person to illustrate the book, or to,
Mhm.
to write the story. I think if people are really honest about it, and they have what they call, what do they call now? Cultural, we get these consultants now who take a look at things to make sure that everything is kosher. Everything is all right. And even with my own book, um, when I was writing, I had a Chinese character in there, and I had two Chinese editors get back to me and say, no, he wouldn't do this, or it shouldn't be that. And so you do need that. You need somebody. You need some eyes on it. So I do agree that it helps to be from within the culture. I don't think it's limited though. I mean, I grew up in different countries,
Yeah,
in different places,
that,
and I felt like if I wanted to put somebody in a kimono in my book, I should have that freedom to do so. Do you know, there was a woman, Nancy Lyric, who wrote an article years ago, back in the 70s, and she said that, what is it, not Harry Potter, Beatrix Potter, when she wrote Peter Rabbit, she said it would never get written because it would have to be written by a rabbit to be authentic. Do you know? So I personally come down on the side of, as long as you're doing the research, as long as you're being honest, as long as you've had some other eyes on it, you ought to be able to access
great,
and
great.
and write about any culture. But there are just too many people who don't do that. There are
That's
too many people, and I've seen too many manuscripts where people will throw in just any culture because they think that is the trend.
so anyway, so let's wrap up this. We continue part two with Pat Cummings today from New York, directly from New
Brooklyn,
York. in
Brooklyn, New
her,
York.
in
It's a
her
whole
lovely,
other
what?
Brooklyn, New York.
Brooklyn, New York.
A whole other planet.
Wow.
Yes.
Yeah, it's another planet. Is that right? And
Yes.
directly from her studio. And, one of the things that I asked as a favor to Pat, it
Mhm.
was to share with us maybe some techniques or ideas to, be able to know that we're at home, and that's welcome. Ideas are always welcome. What can we do as an exercise? And Pat, do you have something for us that you can share?
It's not like what you're talking about with the meditation, because a lot of my stories start at home, my own experiences, things that have happened with my brother and sisters, and I think that you have so many stories inside of you that, for me, with my students, I always encourage them, take a look back in your sketchbooks or in your journals, if you ever kept a journal.
Yeah.
It's time to dump all that stuff out of the closet and go through it and see if you have the germs of stories there. Because truthfully, Yvette, there's only like 10 stories for little kids. It's either about, first day of school or getting used to the idea of a younger brother or sister coming in the house. There's some stories, your best friend, becoming friends with somebody else. There's certain stories that are always going to resonate, and they have this core thing in common. So if you think back to your own childhood, there's stories that you probably want to tell. And now is a great time to start putting those out. There was a student of mine who, she did a book in class that was kind of strange, and she was really determined to sell it because she was Japanese, and she had to go home after she graduated because her visa was up. And so she really went around town and she was really trying to sell that story. And she had the story in a dummy. It was like fabulous. It was a little strange. But she also had a story she was working on that was just thumbnails. It was a story about a cat named Dinah who got lost. It was a very conventional kind of a story, right? So she went to one publisher, and it just so happened the publisher's name was Dinah, and she loved cats.
Wow.
Yeah.
No.
And so she saw that, the thumbnails, and she loved that and wanted to do that as the first book to
Wow.
introduce her, because the other book was a little bit strange, and publishers are going to want to introduce you with a book that everybody's going to love. Do you know? Because if you're a new illustrator, they want to put you with a writer who's everybody's names already knows her name, or vice versa, just so that they'll sell it, right? But when you have a writer illustrator who's brand new, you kind of, they want something that they feel is going to be,
Yeah.
everybody will love. And so that's what they did. They came out with this book about Dinah, lost cat. Everybody loves that. And then her second book was this strange one. But when she came back to the States and she wanted to sell some more books, this kid had like a stack this big of folders. And in each folder, there was either a sketch, a story, thumbnails, maybe a drawing, whatever she had on each story. And I've taken that as like a really smart way to organize your story ideas. And so I just keep folders, and I keep folders like this for each one of the story ideas, and they're all in different stages. But I really feel like now is a good time to organize that and to go through your sketchbook and your journals and tuck these things away. This one could be a story about getting a new puppy. This could be a story about my first day at school. And just start building it like that.
That's great. And also from your sketches, I heard, as an extra tip, if you look back to your drawings, you might find a character that for some reason you didn't pay attention, and suddenly it's popping out and say, hey, hello, write about me. And, it's sketches books are amazing. So talking about a sketches book, and thank you so much for the wonderful, tip that you gave us. Talking about the sketches, do you go out when things were like when they were before?
Yeah.
Are you that kind of person that would carry a sketchbook in your purse and a pen or something?
No, not anymore. I used to carry a sketchbook, and now what I have is a file. And in this file, I call it my SIAM file, SIAM.
Yeah.
And the SIAM file is for things that I doodle when I'm stuck in a meeting.
Okay.
That's what it stands for. Because now I'm in meetings all the time. And so I doodle. And I keep those, and I have characters in those files that I'm thinking one day, yeah, I might turn it into something. But you said earlier something about, what are you passionate about today? And it does change, because what I find is something will trigger something, and I'll go get one of those folders and start working on that. Yeah. I just feel like drawing today, so I'll go get one of those and work on it, and push it along. And like I said, I've learned to be a little bit more developed with my story before I show it to somebody. Because, you can get in over your head by showing something too soon.
Yeah. Or be ready if someone likes that idea and have a second plan to continue working on that. Yeah.
That's something that Tommy DePaolo said. He came to my class one time and he was talking to students, and he said, it's not enough to have talent and to have ideas. You have to be ready. you have to be ready, because when you run into somebody who says to you, do you have a story you're working on or something, be ready.
Yes.
You know, the worst thing to do would be to say, oh no, well, you know, I'll get back to you one of these days. That doesn't happen.
That's true. So let me ask you one more question. As a teacher, what do you hear the most from the students that is their biggest fear? You know, because real life is different than the school
Yes.
environment. And
Yes.
what do you tell them in that answer, in that
Yeah.
you know, questioning that they have?
Well, you hit it right on the head. It's fear. And so everybody will have fear of different things. But I was very fortunate because my parents raised me to feel like I can do anything.
Yeah.
There was never a lid. Nobody ever said you can't do something, you know? I ran into it, like I said, when I got to school, and they said, you can't do this, you can't do that. But the biggest thing is fear. And what always amazes me is that people are so afraid that people will judge them and
Mm-hmm.
find that their stuff is not good enough. For who? For who? You know? So my thing is when I'm talking to my class is, and I tell them, and I totally believe this, if you're not having fun, you're not doing it right. You know?
Yeah.
It's supposed to be you're having fun. Seriously, if you did a story and you loved it,
Yeah.
a publisher wants to see, what does Yvette love? What does Yvette want to write about? Because that's what they can't do. They can't produce the stories. They can just publish them, right? So they want people who are in love with what it is that they do and have a passion for it. And if you are somebody, like I was talking to a friend this morning, she's working on a job on a book cover, but the author is going on Twitter and asking people, what do you think of this? What do you think of that? And every time another opinion comes in, she changes her mind. What is that?
Yeah.
What is that?
Yeah.
You have to do what you do, know what you love doing, and put it out there. And
That's
the
true.
fear part, hey, you know, what's the fear? Are you going to get rejected? Oh, yes. Oh, yes. That's step one. You get rejected.
That's
Okay.
nature, right? That's a given.
You know, yeah. I had an editor one time take one of my stories and push it across the table with his finger, like he barely wanted to touch it. And I was like, I get it. You don't want it.
Wow.
You know, but this
Oh,
was
dear.
also, but this was an editor who published a bunch of books, you know, that I did. So it was like he was really supportive. He didn't like that one. Okay, you know, and so
That's
somebody
okay.
else might.
And that's okay. And it's a valid point because, you know, just I sometimes think about books, about real estate. Think about when you want to sell your house,
Yes.
and there's always a buyer for that house. May
Yes.
not be what you thought it was going to be,
Yes.
the particular family. You know, in matter of fact, it may take you by surprise who end up,
Yes.
you know, buying your house. Same thing happens when you are giving a manuscript to a publisher. You
Mm-hmm.
may think that this manuscript is perfect for that person, and it might surprise you that someone else would
Yes.
take it because they just loved it. And, you know, they might not even know you, right? And
You don't know.
you
You
don't,
don't know.
you never
And
know.
yeah, and you can walk away feeling like, oh, I'll never work in this town because so and so doesn't love me. But what you might not realize is you took a dog story to somebody who was mauled by a dog when they were 7 years old. They will never buy a dog story. How would you know that? You don't. You know, I had an editor once tell me, and this is true, I took in the first page of the book I was working with, you know, with her on, and I had done it, and the colors were like lavender and yellow, and I loved the colors together. And she said, I hate those colors. Those colors should never be together. And I was like, what's wrong with it? She said, lavender and yellow, they just don't go together. And I loved it. And I said, listen, I won't do this combination again on another page, but I love it on this page. She brought in people to try and tell me that it was horrible color combination, and nobody was going there. So I was like, I'm going to keep it and I'll do something different on the next page. When the book was over, a year, 2 years later, I come into her office and there's a poster on the wall that's all lavender and yellow. It was done by Leo and Diane Dillon. And
Yeah.
I said, oh, Leo and Diane Dillon can use those colors. And she said, what happened was when she was in high school, she was dating this guy and she was madly in love with him. And she went to an Easter dance and he ran off with a girl wearing a lavender and yellow dress.
Oh my gosh.
I
See,
mean,
all the
how
stories.
would you know that, right? And so you walk away thinking, I've used horrible colors. They're, it's me. It's not. It's not. And so when I'm talking to my students, I try to tell them all that fear that you have, a lot of it, you're generating it yourself. There's so many people who are going to tell you what you can't do and be negative. Don't be one of them. Don't do it to yourself.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's like, I'm not saying have an ego like everything you do is perfect. You listen, but if fear is stopping you, then you shouldn't be doing it.
That's correct. That's correct. This is a very tough business, and saying that, we are encouraging every single day for people to continue, learning or getting into this business, because at the end of the day, we all know that even though it's so difficult, it's wonderful. And it has so many gratifications, right? And we're crazy doing this, but we know that we're crazy anyway.
But I don't even believe it has to be that difficult. I believe it should be fun. You're supposed to be having fun, I also tell my class, I quote from Prince, the artist formerly known as Prince. Everybody says nothing comes too easy, but if you got it, nothing comes too hard. And that's true. Just do what you love. Do what you love and let them see that, this is worth publishing.
That's true.
I wouldn't, I don't know. I wouldn't beat myself over the head and say, oh, it's too hard, or is this, if you're not having a good time, it's not going to be a good time for the kid who's reading the book.
This reminds me also about drawing. Drawing and learning how to draw, I don't know if you agree or not, but it's different skills that trying to be a basketball player, because you do need to have that height, and it's a different kind of skills and practice, right? But drawing, it is true, it's like another muscle. It's like writing. The more you write, the more you draw, the more you read, there's no way you can have a failure on this business, right? So it's just about practice and getting every challenging, taking it at a time. And and rejections. What are rejections? What is a rejection, Pat Cummings? Tell us your words.
I have seen some rejection. No, I mean, it's like, it almost doesn't matter. It's going to sting. It always stings if somebody doesn't like what you've done. But by the same token, that's them. It's like what you said about, not realizing it's that one person doesn't like it. Somebody else might. Yes. It's just, I don't know, that part never bothered me.
Yeah.
That part never bothered me. It was always kind of like, okay, so I'll take it someplace else and see what they think over here. You know what happened one time? I had taken a manuscript and thumbnails to an editor, and she didn't want it. She's like, no, it's not for me. And 2 years later, I thought, I really want to do this story. And I showed it to her again. She said, oh, I love this. And I'm like,
I have heard that stories before. I have heard that.
Yes. And I said, now I could remind her that she turned it down 2 years ago, but I won't, because people change. And so everything changes. And it's just, it might not have been the right time.
Exactly. Sometimes it doesn't click at the first time, because maybe that person is having other problems, thinking in a lot of other things, and it doesn't come to her or him straight, right? And then you wait a year, 2 years, and I have heard that in so many sectors, especially in articles from magazines, that doesn't has anything to do with trends, but that person sends that same article again to that same art director or editor, and then he goes like, oh, I like it, and I'm like, duh, I sent it to you 2 years ago. It's almost like you want to say that, right?
But sometimes you have to tweak it. I mean, a woman came back to class this last semester. She had done a book in class that was really very charming, but it didn't quite work. And she worked on it for 10 years. Every now and then she'd go back to it and she'd change a little something, and finally it clicked and she got it published. But she had to kind of keep revisiting it and figuring out what is it that doesn't quite work yet. And then when it did work, she's off and running. And now she's on like her 3rd or 4th book. Yeah. But sometimes it does take a while for the penny to drop, for you to realize,
that is amazing. And I just want to retake a little bit of our first part of the video, because they caught us in like in the last sentence, right? And I do feel sad that, you know, the people that were here with us, they lost the link, because I still need to learn that, you know, it might take us from surprise that we extend the conversation, and I need to have two links ready for everybody. And something that Harold told me, and I forgot to put it in practice, so I need to put it in practice next time. But I just wanted to summarize the little part at the very end of the first video. That what we're talking is about, first of all, be happy for what you do, be honest. And if you are an illustrator, no matter from which part of the world, and you do your work from your soul and your heart, it doesn't matter if it's a Chinese story or an Indian story, or pick up any country, culture, diversity that exists out there. Yes, you can illustrate the book.
But you have to ask yourself why you're doing it too. Because I have run into too many people who will like you run into a white person who wants to do a story about a black figure. Why do you want to do that story?
Yes.
And sometimes, even though I don't think they're admitting it, they want to do it because they think it will sell.
Exactly.
And that's not, there's no connection.
Not the way to, yeah, that's not the way
no connection, you know?
In that case, that's where a good publisher comes into, you know, doing the homework too, doing the diligence about knowing that this is a project that is meant to be for having that child at the end of the day happy and seeing himself in that book, and really being, you know, the most honest with that work. It's not about selling, right? If it was about selling, the market would be completely different.
Well, everybody wants to sell. You know what I mean? That's understood. But I'm just saying, if that's the only motivation, it's
not a fair motivation. I agree with you. I definitely agree with you. Yeah, yeah. And that's where you have to draw a line. And I think that editor sometimes is the, at least I'm speaking for me, you know, as an editor, I really want to know who you are as a person, and what are your intentions, and if this is just one time only, or am I gonna build a relationship with you, you know, and are we gonna be both on this thing together? Because if those answers are no, then nothing is gonna happen from the end, right? So yeah, you have to do your homework. So anyways, and one more last question I was gonna ask you, that this is something that happens here in Brazil, and I'm curious if it happens in US. Do we see in US a lot of common picture books written by two authors, or pretty much it's only one author who writes the book, or does publishers invite or open that to happen?
They're open to it. Yeah, I mean, sometimes people team up. I mean, it's not unusual.
Okay.
It's not the norm. It's not the normal thing.
It's not the norm, right? It's very rare, right? Okay.
But it doesn't, it wouldn't stop anybody. If they like the story, it's not going to stop them because there's two authors instead of one.
Mother and daughter, or maybe two very good friends that they want to, you know, put together a story.
In fact, one of the women who was watching, Stephanie, she writes with a co-author, and they've got bunches of books out.
But definitely, thank you so much. Take care, and you know, we wish that this soon can we all go out and enjoy the sunny days, and even the feeling of the rain, you know, that is nice to go out. And now it is really nice, right, to appreciate the rain and go out, and it doesn't matter, because now any weather is kind of quote unquote appreciated as long as we can go outside. But Pat, thank you. We'll talk soon, and have a wonderful evening.
And thanks for having me on here. Really enjoyed talking to you. Take care.